So I recently made the executive decision to sit down and rewatch every single Fast and the Furious movie.
Ridiculous.
From the humble beginnings of stealing DVD players to, well, driving cars in outer space.
Wow.
Now you might be asking, why? Why didn't you just stop at the first one and save your sanity?
Why?
Why? Why didn't you stop?
And the truth is, I don't know. Maybe I just like pain. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. Or maybe I just really needed to see Vin Diesel saying the word family about 500 times in a row just to feel something.
Family.
I actually can't believe I'm saying this. Contrary to my very low expectations going into this marathon, I was actually pleasantly surprised.
What the hell?
What the hell?
In fact, this rewatch didn't just help me kill a few brain cells, it completely shifted my perspective on the entire saga.
No way.
There is one movie in the later half of this franchise, one that I used to think was just absolute slop, that has completely changed for me.
You're not gonna tell us.
I'm talking a total 180 here, and this journey recontextualized the whole picture of what this franchise actually is. But we will get into that, don't you worry.
Oh, thank God.
You guys know I love a deep dive. I love taking these massive behemoth franchises that have dominated pop culture for decades, breaking them down and putting them under the microscope to find out where they went right, where they went wrong, and where they went absolutely batshit insane.
Damn right.
And there is no franchise in history that fits that description better than Fast and the Furious. So we are going to look at the evolution from a gritty point break ripoff to a superhero soap opera with cars. We're going to look at the good, the bad, and the goddamn awful. So buckle up, let's revisit the rise, the fatal fall, and the inexplicable rise again of the Fast and the Furious. So, let's take it all the way back to 2001, a simpler time. A time before submarines, before flying cars, and before The Rock could curl a helicopter with his bare biceps. We're going back to the humble roots of a franchise that started with a budget of just $38 million. To put that into perspective, the catering budget for Fast X was probably higher than that. Looking back at the Fast and the Furious now, it is almost adorable how low the stakes were. We aren't trying to stop a nuclear war or a cyber terrorist from hacking the planet. No, we are trying to stop a guy from stealing Panasonic DVD players. And it is obvious that this movie is essentially Point Break with cars. I'm not breaking any new ground by saying that. It's been called Great Value Point Break for decades, and the comparison is valid. You've got the undercover agent infiltrating a group of adrenaline junkies who commit crimes to fund their lifestyle. He gets too close, falls for the girl, and eventually lets the bad guy go. It's the same movie, but here is the thing. I don't care. Because even though it's a structural clone, the Fast and the Furious manages to capture a specific thing that Point Break didn't. It captured a culture. This movie is a time capsule. Watching it today is like injecting the early 2000s directly into your veins. We're talking flip phones, bucket hats, giant sneakers, and a soundtrack dominated by aggressive new metal and techno drum and bass. It is a neon-soaked love letter to an era of questionable fashion and even more questionable car modifications. But that aesthetic, that vibe, that is what gave this movie its soul. It felt authentic to the street racing subculture of the time, or at least the Hollywood version of it that we all wanted to believe was real. A huge part of why this works comes down to the script work by David Ayer. Yes, the Training Day and Suicide Squad guy. He took the setting from New York to LA and injected it with the diversity and grit he grew up with. He gave these characters actual flavor. Originally, Vin Diesel hated the script. He was ready to walk, but he sat down with Ayer and hammered out a code for Dominic Toretto. And thank God he did, because without that code, Dom is just a thug stealing electronics. With the code, he's an anti-hero. He's a leader. And of course, we have to talk about the racing. Look, from a technical standpoint, the racing in this movie is hilarious. We all know the memes. A quarter-mile race that is supposed to take 10 seconds somehow takes 2 minutes of screen time. These guys are shifting gears about 50 times in a straight line. The visuals of the engine internals firing like we're inside of a combustion chamber. It's completely surreal. It's abstract filmmaking wearing the costume of a big dumb blockbuster. But it worked. It made me believe that a Honda Civic with a spoon engine was the coolest thing on the planet. But the real reason this film holds up and the reason it spawned a multi-billion-dollar empire isn't the cars.
What's the retail on one of those?
More than you can afford, pal. Ferrari.
it's the chemistry. Specifically, the brotherhood between Paul Walker's Brian O'Connor and Vin Diesel's Dom Toretto. There is a palpable energy between them. It sells the central conflict of the movie perfectly. This brings us to the core theme that elevates this film above being just Point Break with cars, and that is the corruption of Brian Connor. The movie tricks you. It manipulates you into rooting for the bad guys. Dom is a menace. He's endangering lives, he's hijacking trucks and causing chaos just for the thrill of it and some quick cash. He is objectively the villain of society here, but Brian and the audience slowly realize that the bad guys treat him better than the cops do. The police force is cold, bureaucratic, and uses him as a tool. Dom offers him respect. Dom offers him loyalty. Dom offers him, well, dare I say it, family.
Family.
And I know the family meme has been beaten to death, but in the first movie, it wasn't a meme. When Michelle Rodriguez fought for Letty to be more than just a trophy girlfriend, demanding she actually throw a punch, it added layers to this crew. They felt like a real dysfunctional unit. So when we get that final race and Brian hands Dom the keys to his 10-second car saying the iconic line, "I owe you a 10-second car," it feels earned. It's the moment Brian chooses chaos and brotherhood over law and order. It's a fantastic character beat that defines the rest of the series. The Fast and the Furious, honestly, it's not a masterpiece of cinema in the traditional sense. It's cheesy, it's dated, and the physics are already starting to get a little loose, but it has heart, it has a soul, it established the rules. It doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile, winning's winning. And for a budget of $38 million, this movie won by a mile. It set a perfect foundation. We had our heroes, we had our dynamic, and we had a box office hit. The future looked bright. Surely the studio would take this winning formula, keep the cast together, and immediately capitalize on that incredible chemistry for the sequel, right? Yeah, about that. Because as we move into Too Fast, Too Furious, we're about to find out what happens when you take the most important ingredient out of the recipe. And things are about to get colorful, confusing, and very, very hungry.
We hungry. We hungry. I'm hungry.
So, the first movie made bank. It cost peanuts to make and brought in a tidy profit. Naturally, Universal wanted a sequel and they wanted it fast, but there was a problem. A Vin Diesel-shaped problem. See, Vin Diesel looked at the script for Too Fast, Too Furious and basically said, "This ain't it, chief." He wanted a continuation of the story, not a rehash. He also wanted about $20 million, which is a ballsy move after one hit movie. The studio balked, Diesel walked, and suddenly the family was broken before it even really started. We lost Dom, we lost Letty, we lost Mia. For all intents and purposes, this should have been the end of the franchise. It felt like a straight-to-DVD sequel in everything but budget, and yet I kinda love this movie. With Diesel gone, the studio pivoted hard. They moved the action from the gritty streets of LA to the neon-soaked Park City of Miami, and man, is this movie a vibe. If the first movie was a new metal music video, Too Fast, Too Furious is a ludicrous track come to life. Director John Singleton stepped in and, instead of trying to recreate the serious tone of the first film, he leaned more into the absurdity. He wanted it to be fun, and he encouraged improvisation. And this is where the franchise starts to show its true colors, literally and figuratively. The movie is bright, loud, and incredibly stupid. We get Brian O'Connor, now a disgraced ex-cop living on a houseboat making money street racing. And since Dom isn't around to be the brooding tough guy, Brian needed a new foil. Enter Roman Pierce, played by Tyrese Gibson. I'm just gonna say it, Tyrese is the MVP of this movie. He brings the frantic, chaotic energy that the franchise needed. His chemistry with Paul Walker is also flawless. In fact, you could argue it's almost too flawless. We also get the introduction of Tej Parker, played by Ludacris, who at this point in the timeline is just a garage owner and race organizer, long before he becomes a master hacker and theoretical physicist. It's hilarious seeing these characters in their infancy, knowing that in a few movies, they'll be saving the world, but here, they're just trying not to get killed by a drug lord. Speaking of drug lords, Cole Hauser plays Carter Verone, and he is surprisingly menacing. He's not trying to destroy the world, he's just a rich, sadistic motherfucker. The scene with the rat in the bucket, that is legitimately terrifying and feels like it belongs in a completely different movie. It's a really weird tonal clash in a film that otherwise feels like a live-action cartoon. And cartoon is the key word here. The CGI in the race scenes looks like a cutscene from Need for Speed Underground. The physics start to take a backseat to the rule of cool. We have cars jumping onto boats. We have an army of street racers scrambling police cars in a sequence that is pure chaotic joy. It's the first real step towards the heist adventure genre the series would eventually dominate, even if it hadn't quite figured out the formula yet. But Too Fast, Too Furious suffers from a serious identity crisis. It doesn't know if it wants to be a buddy cop comedy, a crime thriller, or a serious action movie. It is all over the place. The dialogue is cheesy beyond belief, and the plot is thinner than the plot armor in F9. Common sense is to hate it. This movie might be called out for being loud, dumb, and shallow, and yes, it is loud, dumb, and shallow, but it also has an undeniable charm. It's a detour. It's a colorful, neon-lit, NOS-fueled detour that proved Paul Walker could carry a movie, even without Vin Diesel grunting beside him. It kept the franchise on life support just long enough to keep the lights on. However, despite making decent money, the critical reception was a wake-up call. The series was already showing signs of fatigue by movie number 2. They couldn't just do the same thing again. They needed to reinvent. They needed to go somewhere new to catch a new drift. And that brings us to the weirdest, most misunderstood, and arguably most important pivot point in the entire saga. We are leaving the American streets behind and we are going to Tokyo. Things are about to get weird. And now we arrive at the black sheep of the family, the weird cousin who shows up to the reunion with a completely different accent and a car that you've never seen before, Tokyo Drift. By 2006, the franchise was effectively dead in the water. Diesel was gone, Paul Walker was gone. The studio had 2 movies under its belt, but no stars to carry a third. So what did they do? They threw a Hail Mary. They decided to reboot the whole thing, cast a bunch of high schoolers played by actors that were pushing 30, and move the entire operation to Japan. And I'm brave enough to say this out loud. Tokyo Drift is by far the most underrated film in this entire franchise. If you don't like it, you are wrong. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. You're just wrong. Conceptually, this movie is just Karate Kid with cars. American kid goes to Japan, feels like an outsider, falls for a girl, pisses off the local bully, and learns a new skill to defeat him. Instead of a crane kick, it's drifting. It's simple, it's effective, and it's arguably the last time this franchise was actually about car culture. The plot centers on Sean Boswell, played by Lucas Black. Now look, I love Lucas Black, but watching him try to play a 17-year-old high school student is unintentional comedy gold. The man has a 5 o'clock shadow and a hairline that's already thinking about retirement. He looks like a 35-year-old undercover cop who got held back a few grades. He also has the charisma of a wooden plank for most of the movie, but weirdly enough, it kind of works. He's the ultimate outsider, stumbling through Tokyo with that thick Alabama accent, completely out of his depth. But the reason this movie works, and the reason it has achieved cult status, isn't Sean. It's Han. Sung Kang as Han is single-handedly the coolest character in the history of this franchise. The man just oozes charisma. He's always eating, he's always calm, always observing. He takes Sean under his wing not because he has to, but because he's bored and wants to see what the kid is made of. 1 car in exchange for knowing what a man's made of, that's a price I can live with. That line alone has more depth than the entire script of F9. Han was so good, so universally loved by test audiences that he broke the timeline of the entire franchise. Spoiler alert, Han dies in this movie, but he was so popular that the studio literally twisted the fabric of time to bring him back for 3 more movies, making Fast and Furious 4, 5, and 6 prequels just so we could hang out with him a little bit longer. That is the power of Han. Now, visually, this film is a masterpiece of its genre. Director Justin Lin, who was basically an indie filmmaker before this, brought a style that was distinct and vibrant. The drifting scenes are hypnotic. There's no CGI cars jumping skyscrapers here, just raw mechanical skill. The scene where they drift through the crowded Shibuya crossing, iconic. It's kinetic, it's loud, and it feels dangerous in a way the later movies just don't. But in 2006, nobody cared. The movie bombed in the US. It made less than half of what Too Fast, Too Furious did. It seemed like the nail in the coffin, but Universal had one last card to play. They convinced Vin Diesel to come back for a literal 30-second cameo at the very end in exchange for the rights to the Riddick franchise. And that one scene changed everything. The theater erupted. It confirmed that this weird little spin-off was actually connected to the main timeline. Dom Toretto was friends with Han. It bridged the gap and promised that the family was coming back together. Tokyo Drift proved that you didn't need the original cast to make a good car movie, but you did need them to make a box office hit. It was a failure financially, but creatively, it introduced Justin Lin, who would go on to save the franchise. It introduced Han, the heart of the team, and it proved that this series could actually evolve. So while it was a commercial flop at the time, in retrospect, Tokyo Drift is the most pivotal movie in the saga. It forced the studio to rethink their strategy. They realized they couldn't just keep making spin-offs, they needed to go back to the source. They needed the original crew, and next time, they weren't going to be stealing DVD players. They were going to be stealing something much, much bigger. Alright, so the experiment in Tokyo was a critical success, but a financial stumble. Universal realized that while drifting is cool, what puts butts in seats is Vin Diesel's biceps and Paul Walker's blue eyes. So for the fourth installment, they decided to go back to basics. They even stripped the title down to the bare essentials. We went from the Fast and the Furious to just Fast and Furious. Cleaner? Maybe. Confusing for anyone trying to organize their DVD shelf? Absolutely. This movie is the great reunion. We get Dom, Brian, Mia, and Letty back on screen together for the first time since 2001. And the charisma levels in this movie are off the charts. You see them standing together and you instantly remember why you cared in the first place. But while the cast is back, the vibe is completely different. Fast and Furious is a funeral. I'm serious. This is easily the most dour, self-serious, and depressing entry in the entire franchise. The vibrant colors of Miami and Tokyo are gone, replaced by this washed out gray filter that screams late 2000s gritty reboot. Everyone is sad. Everyone is angry. Paul Walker is wearing a suit and looking miserable working for the FBI, which, by the way, how did he get reinstated after the events of the first two movies? The man is a literal felon who let criminals go twice, and the FBI is like, yeah, welcome back. Here's a badge. Sure. Okay. Now, the catalyst for all this misery is the death of Letty. Yeah, they kill her off screen in the first act. This turns the movie from a racing film into a full-blown revenge thriller. Dom stopped racing for pink slips and respect. He's hunting now. We see the first real glimpse of Dom Toretto transforming from a street racer into a borderline superhero vigilante. He's deconstructing crime scenes in his head like he's Batman. He's dangling guys out of windows. He's getting shot and barely flinching. This tonal shift is interesting, but in execution, it's kind of a slog. The movie takes itself so incredibly serious that it forgets to be fun. Mia is just pissed off at Brian the whole time. Brian is dealing with this internal conflict of duty versus family again, but without the bromantic charm of the first movie. The villain, a cartel boss named Braga, is painfully generic. There's a line where Brian asks a henchman, "How did this happen?" and the guy replies, "You're still breathing." It's meant to be tough, but it just comes off as edgy for the sake of being edgy. However, we have to give credit where credit is due. This movie is the true midpoint of the franchise's evolution. It bridges the gap between the street level stakes and the insanity that follows. The opening heist sequences with the gas tankers in the Dominican Republic is arguably the best scene in the movie. It's massive, practical, and intense. And then Dom drives his Buick Grand National under a bouncing, burning oil tanker. That shot right there, that is the exact moment the franchise said goodbye to physics. It was a handshake agreement with the audience. We are going to do cool shit, and you are not going to ask questions about gravity. But not all the action holds up. The climax involves a chase through underground smuggling tunnels that relies heavily on 2009 era CGI. It looks like absolute slop. Dark and muddy, it's a rare miss for Justin Lin, who usually nails the kinetic energy of these things. Also, we have to talk about the timeline gymnastics that this movie performs. Han is back. He's in the opening scene, eating chips, being cool. But didn't he die in Tokyo? Yes. He did, but because Sung Kang was so charismatic, like I said, and Justin Lin loved him so much, they decided to retcon the entire timeline. Fast 4, 5, and 6 are now officially prequels to Tokyo Drift. It's confusing, it's messy, and it's kind of soap opera logic that I absolutely live for. Ultimately though, Fast and Furious is a weird entry. It made a ton of money, $360 million, the highest yet. That tells us the family formula was the golden ticket. But as a film, it's forgettable. It's a necessary stepping stone. It did the heavy lifting of getting the band back together, clearing Brian's slate, and setting up the pieces on the board. It ends with Brian blowing his cover again to break Dom out of a prison bus, and that final shot of the Charger flipping alongside the bus, that is the promise of something better. It's the franchise shedding its skin. Fast and Furious walked through the mud and the misery so that the next movie could run. Fast 5 is the wake where everyone gets drunk, starts a brawl, and accidentally burns the house down. This is the moment. If you ask 99% of fans, critics, or just casual moviegoers, they will tell you that Fast 5 is the peak of the franchise, and I pretty much agree. It's the moment the franchise stopped pretending to be about street racing and finally embraced what it was destined to be, a heist movie on steroids. Universal looked at the numbers and realized something important. Street racing has a ceiling. There are only so many times you can drive in a straight line for a quarter mile before it gets boring. They wanted that Italian job money. They wanted that gone in 60 seconds global appeal. So writer Chris Morgan and director Justin Lin took the grey, depressing tone of the fourth movie and threw it out the window. They injected color, they injected fun, and most importantly, they injected an absurd amount of baby oil. Enter Luke Hobbs. Enter Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. This casting decision is arguably the single most important moment in the franchise's history. Legend has it that the role was originally written for Tommy Lee Jones, which is hilarious to think about, but a fan on Facebook suggested The Rock and Vin Diesel actually listened to that. And thank God he did. Hobbs changes the entire dynamic. Not a villain, not an antagonist, he is a force of nature. And the man is perpetually sweating. I don't know if it's the humidity in Rio or if he's just leaking testosterone, but the guy is glistening in every single frame. He smashes through windows like they're made of sugar glass. He treats walls like suggestions. The chemistry between him and Vin Diesel is electric. It's hostile, it's aggressive, and it feels real. Probably because, as we know, they genuinely didn't like each other. That fight scene between them, that's not just choreography, that is just two massive egos colliding. But Hobbs is not the only thing the movie could give. This is the Avengers assemble moment before the Avengers even did it. They bring back everyone. Roman, Tej, Han, Giselle, Leo, Santos. It's the greatest hits compilation. Seeing these characters from different movies interact is pure fan service done right. It solidified the family dynamic in a way that actually felt earned rather than forced. However, I have to be the buzzkill here. I have to be the guy in the corner of the party pointing out the obvious. While everyone calls this a masterpiece, I have a major issue with it. Fast 5 is a blatant, shameless ripoff of Ocean's 11. It's almost distracting how much it lifts from the Soderbergh classic. The gathering of the team, the specialized roles, the planning montage, it's all there. But here is the problem. Ocean's 11 is smart. Fast 5 tries to be. They spend the entire movie planning this intricate, stealthy heist to break into the police station. They get the layout, they hack the cameras, they clone the villain's handprint, which involves Giselle in a bikini because, of course it does. They spend an hour convincing us they are going to be surgical. And then, they just drive 2 Dodge Chargers through the wall and drag the vault out. It renders the entire second act of the movie pretty much pointless. Why did you spend all that time planning a stealth mission if your plan B was just smash? It's a smash and grab job disguised as a smart heist film. It's fun, sure, but let's not pretend it's clever. But then the vault chase happens and all of my criticisms sort of melt away. This sequence is the crown jewel of the franchise. Dom Toretto and Brian O'Connor dragging a multi-ton bank vault through the streets of Rio de Janeiro, using it as a wrecking ball to destroy police cars, buildings, and the laws of physics. It is the most ridiculous thing I had ever seen up to that point. It defies logic, it defies gravity, it defies common sense. but it works. And do you know why? Because it's practical. They actually built a vault, well, a foam one on wheels, and dragged it through the streets. They actually smashed those cars. In an era where everything is becoming weightless CGI sludge, watching real metal crunch against real metal triggers something primal in your brain. It feels dangerous, it feels heavy. It destroyed the audience's suspension of disbelief, sure, but it replaced it with pure awe. This movie just hits the sweet spot. It's the perfect balance. It still has one foot in the gritty reality of the earlier films, the sweat, the dirt, the street level stakes, but the other foot is firmly planted in the superhero genre. Dom is a tactical genius now who can survive a bridge jump that would kill a Terminator. Fast 5 saved the franchise. It made over $600 million. It turned a niche racing series into a global blockbuster juggernaut. You don't need logic if you have charisma and practical stunts. But here is the danger of reaching the peak. Once you're at the top, the only way to go is down. Or, in the case of this franchise, the only way to go is increasingly, stupidly up. Because once you've dragged a vault through Rio, a tank on a highway doesn't seem so crazy, and neither does a submarine or a spaceship. Fast and Furious 6 is where the franchise fully commits to being a completely superhero movie. Hobbs shows up not to arrest Dom, but to recruit him. Why? Because there is a villain named Owen Shaw who is basically the evil mirror version of Dom's crew. They have a tech guy. Shaw has a tech guy. They have a muscle guy. Shaw has a muscle guy. It's the classic, we are not so different, you and I trope, but with more cars and less nuance. But the real hook here is Letty. Remember how she died in the fourth movie? Well, surprise, she's alive, but there's a catch. She has amnesia. We are in full Days of Our Lives territory here. It is a telenovela with nitrous. Letty doesn't remember Dom, she doesn't remember the family, and she is working for the bad guys. It is the cheesiest, most soap opera plot device imaginable. It gives Dom a reason to be a sage-like soothsayer, dropping monologues about family with the gravity of a man announcing the end of the world. This movie also cements the team dynamic. In the early films, it was the Brian and Dom show. Now everyone has a job. Roman and Tej are the comic relief duo, Han and Giselle are the cool, tragic lovers, Hobbs is the Hulk, and Dom is Captain America. And speaking of superheroes, let's talk about the complete lack of physics. Fast 6 breaks rules over its knee and laughs. A tank is tearing down a highway, crushing cars like soda cans. The tank shoots Letty off the roof, and Dom crashes his car into a guardrail to launch himself like a bold, muscular projectile across a bridge gap. He catches Letty mid-air, defies gravity, changes his trajectory while flying, and lands safely on a car windshield. When Letty asks, "How did you know the car would be there to break our fall?" Dom doesn't say physics. He doesn't say luck. He just looks at her. The answer is obviously family. Family breaks falls. Family ignores terminal velocity. It is the most absurd sequence in the franchise up to this point. But nothing compares to the infamous endless runway. The climax of this movie takes place on an airport runway as the team tries to stop a cargo plane from taking off. The scene goes on for about 13 minutes. People did the math on this, and based on the speed of the vehicles and the duration of the scene, this runway is estimated to be anywhere between 18 and 29 miles long. It crosses zip codes. You could land a space shuttle on this thing. It is completely outside of reality. It is continuous, nonsensical, and ridiculous, but it's also undeniably entertaining. We get the tragic death of Giselle, which was just a plot device to get Han to go to Tokyo so the timeline could finally sync up. And we get Vin Diesel driving a car out of the nose of an exploding airplane. Rewatching Fast 6, I realized something. This movie is actually really good. I used to think it was just more of the same, but it's actually the perfect bridge. It takes the grounded grit of the early films and marries it to the high-octane absurdity of the later ones. It hits a sweet spot that the later movies just completely missed. The action is crisp. Shout out to the fight between Michelle Rodriguez and Gina Carano, by the way, which actually looks painful. And the pacing is also relentless. Justin Lin showed that he was one of the best action directors working in Hollywood here. Fast and Furious 6 ends with the family back at the Toretto house in LA, having a barbecue. The timeline is fixed. Han is off to Tokyo to die. RIP. The team is pardoned, and it felt like a perfect ending. It felt like they could have stopped right here and walked away with their heads held high. But they didn't. didn't stop. Because in a post-credit scene, we find out that Han didn't just crash in Tokyo, he was murdered by Jason Statham. And just like that, the stakes became personal again. But little did we know, a real-life tragedy was about to strike that would change this franchise and the world's perception of it forever. It is hard to talk about Furious 7 as just a movie, because it was a funeral, it was a goodbye, and it was a cultural event that transcended the genre in a way very few films ever do. We all know the story. On November 30th, 2013, with production only halfway done, Paul Walker tragically passed away in a car accident. The man who became a global icon for fast cars and living life a quarter mile at a time was gone in an instant, in a way that eerily echoed the very franchise he helped build. Production shut down, the future of the movie and the franchise was in limbo. Director James Wan, who up until this point was known for scaring the hell out of us with Saw and The Conjuring, was tasked with the impossible. Finish the biggest action movie on the planet, honor its fallen star, and somehow make a coherent story out of half-finished footage. They brought in Paul's brothers Cody and Caleb as stand-ins, they used cutting-edge Weta digital face replacement tech, and against all odds, they actually pulled it off. But before we get to the ending, we have to talk about the movie itself, because Furious 7 is absolute, unadulterated insanity. The premise is simple. Deckard Shaw, played by Jason Statham, is pissed off. His brother Owen is in a coma because of Dom's crew, so Deckard decides to hunt them down. This is the guy who killed Han in Tokyo, finally closing that timeline loop. He blows up the Toretto house, he puts Hobbs in the hospital after a brawl that ends with The Rock falling out of a window and landing on a car, only to later flex a cast off his arm like it's made of paper mache. Statham is also terrifying in this. He is literally the Terminator. He shows up, wrecks stuff, and leaves. But somewhere along the line, the movie decides that a revenge plot isn't enough. No, we need a God's Eye device that can track down anyone on the planet. A generic terrorist villain played by Jamon Hunsu, and Kurt Russell as a shadowy government agent named Mr. Nobody who loves Belgian ale. The action sequences in this film are legendary. We have cars driving out of a C-130 cargo plane at 10,000 feet, and yes, they actually dropped real cars out of a plane for that shot. Then we have the Abu Dhabi sequence, where Dom and Brian drive a $3.4 million Lycan Hypersport through not one, not two, but 3 skyscrapers. Cars don't fly, Dom, Brian screams. But oh Brian, if you only knew. By F9, cars go to space. Jumping skyscrapers is basically a warm-up. But all of this fades into the background when we get to the end. The decision to retire Brian O'Connor instead of killing him off was a masterstroke. It was the only way to honor Paul Walker without being exploitative. The final scene on the beach, watching Brian play with his son while the crew looks on, knowing things will never be the same, it hits hard. But the final drive? When Dom pulls up to that intersection and sees the white Supra pull up next to him, man, I don't care how tough you are. I don't care if you think these movies are dumb. If you didn't feel a lump in your throat when Wiz Khalifa's See You Again started playing, you might not be human. The montage of Paul from the first movie looking so young, so full of life, it's just devastating. And then the road splits, Dom goes one way, Brian goes the other, driving into the light. It's just perfect. Furious 7 grossed over $1.5 billion. It became the high watermark for the franchise financially and emotionally. It was the perfect ending. It tied up every loose end. Han was avenged, sort of. The team had won, Brian was safe, and they should have stopped. Right there, that shot of the Supra disappearing, that should have been the final frame of the Fast and the Furious franchise. It was the perfect send-off and the story was complete. But this is Hollywood, and when a movie makes $1.5 billion, you don't stop, you double down. The fate of the Furious, or F8, get it, is the moment the franchise officially jumped the shark, circled back, and jumped it again just to be sure. It is the first movie in the post-Paul Walker era, and you can feel the void. To fill that void, the writers decided to commit the ultimate sin against the franchise's core philosophy. They turned Dominic Toretto against his family. This is an interesting idea. How does the team survive without their leader? It's supposed to be a cathartic exploration of grief, but in reality, it's a soap opera. It turns out Dom has a secret son with Elena, the cop from Fast 5 who disappeared the second Letty came back. Yeah, she's back, just long enough to be a plot device. Dom is being blackmailed by a cyber terrorist named Cypher, played by Charlize Theron. Now, Charlize Theron is an Oscar-winning actress. She is incredible in Mad Max Fury Road, but here, she is stuck in a glass box for 2 hours, sporting dreadlocks, delivering monologues about choice theory. She's a Bond villain dropped into a car movie, and of course, because the writers are lazy, they retcon her into the history, claiming she was actually the one behind Owen Shaw and Moj Shakand. Sure, whatever. The problem with the evil Dom storyline is that we know it's fake. We know he's not really bad, so all that tension is artificial. It just makes the movie feel dour and surprisingly mean-spirited. But then the action happens, and you remember why you bought the ticket. We get zombie cars in New York, where Cypher hacks thousands of vehicles and makes them rain from the sky like metallic hail. It is visually spectacular and completely stupid. And then the finale takes us to Russia for a chase on a frozen lake against a nuclear submarine. Yes, a nuclear submarine. We have reached the point where Tyrese is driving an orange Lamborghini on ice trying to outrun a torpedo. The laws of physics have been erased from existence. However, the saving grace of this movie is the chemistry between The Rock and Jason Statham. The studio realized that having a brooding evil Dom is kind of a bummer, so they pivoted the fun to Hobbs and Shaw. They hate each other, they roast each other, and they beat the hell out of everyone in their path. And by the way, welcome to the barbecue, Deckard. We forgive you for murdering Han. Hobbs and Shaw was so entertaining that the studio thought it would be worth having a separate movie about them as a spin-off. Not a bad idea, with a pretty good movie, but we're just going to stick to the main series here. Ultimately, The Fate of the Furious suffers from serious formula fatigue. It feels like a filler episode with a massive budget. Scott Eastwood shows up as Little Nobody and is a charisma black hole. The stakes feel repetitive, it's loud, it's big, but it lacks the heart of the previous films. It's clear that the franchise was running on fumes here. They've done tanks, they've done planes, they've done submarines. There is literally nowhere left to go on Earth. So naturally, there was only one place left. F9 is a movie that is so deeply, profoundly stupid that it actually becomes kind of impressive. We have officially left the realm of action movies and entered the realm of Looney Tunes cartoons. Wile E. Coyote has more respect for physics than Dominic Toretto. Let's just address the one barely notable thing, or rather, the Pontiac Fiero in the stratosphere. The problem isn't just the absurdity. We've had absurdity before. The problem is the tone. The movie is painfully self-aware. Roman spends the entire film asking if they are invincible, literally questioning if they are in a simulation or if they have plot armor. Some called this meta or clever. I call it lazy writing. Just because you point out that your movie makes no sense doesn't excuse the fact that it makes no sense. But while Roman and Tej are playing Kerbal Space Program, Dom is stuck in a telenovela. Jacob Toretto, played by John Cena, yep, Dom has a brother now, a secret brother, a brother who has never been mentioned in 8 previous movies, a brother who apparently killed their dad, but not really, because it was a misunderstanding involving a wrench and a fuel line. Like, the retcons here are just exhausting. We get flashbacks to young Dom, played by an actor who looks nothing like Vin Diesel, just to justify this sudden family drama. The conflict between Dom and Jacob is supposed to be the emotional core of the film, but it falls flat because we know exactly how it ends. They fight, they bond, and by the end, Dom gives him the keys to a car and lets him go. It's the Brian O'Connor ending from the first movie recycled for the 5th time. And surprise, surprise, they brought Han back. And the explanation for his survival is Mr. Nobody staged and disguised the scene to fake Han's death. That's it. A hologram or something. It is the laziest explanation possible. Han just shows up, eats some snacks, and kicks a few guys. Don't get me wrong, it's great to see Sung Kang back, but his return feels hollow because it carries 0 weight. Death in this franchise is now officially meaningless. If you die, you just take a few movies off and come back when the contract negotiations work out. F9 is a mess. It's a muddled stew of incompatible ingredients. You have the serious family drama with Dom and Jacob, the sci-fi comedy with Roman and Tej, and Charlize Theron once again stuck in a glass box doing absolutely nothing. She has a magnet plane. That is her contribution. And the action scenes are just noise at this point. Cars swing across canyons on ropes like Tarzan. Dom catches a car with his bare hands. It's all CGI sludge. There is no danger. There is no tension. You watch it with the same emotional detachment as a screensaver. The franchise had become a parody of itself, a hollow shell of the thing we used to love. It was insultingly arrogant, assuming we would swallow anything just because it had the Fast logo on it. And yet, it made money. People watched it and laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was broken. Now, I'm going to keep this chapter of the video a little leaner than the others because if you've been following the channel, you know I actually made a full dedicated video breaking down Fast X right when it came out. So I'm not going to bore you by rehashing every single detail I already screamed about in that video. If you want the full unfiltered autopsy of this fever dream, go check that out after this. But now, let's just hit the highlights of the beginning of the end. Fast X is a fascinating mess. After the PR disaster that was F9, the franchise needed a win. It needed energy, and since they had already gone to space, there was only one place left to go: back to the past. The plot hinges on a retcon of Fast 5. It turns out the drug lord Hernan Reyes had a son, Dante, played by Jason Momoa. And Jason Momoa is the single greatest thing to happen to this franchise in a decade. While Vin Diesel is acting like he's in a Shakespearean tragedy delivering monologues about family with a straight face, Momoa is acting like he's in a completely different movie. He's playing a flamboyant, chaotic, pansexual fashionista who paints the toenails of dead bodies and dances around like a drag queen on acid. He fully understood the assignment. He looked at the script, saw how stupid it was, and decided to just have fun. He is the only source of life in a movie that otherwise feels like it's suffocating under its own weight. Because the rest of the movie is a bloated, formulaic disaster. It's like 5 different movies stitched together by a blind surgeon. We have characters going on side quests that mean nothing. We have a giant spherical bomb rolling through the streets of Rome like it's a pinball machine. It's a theme park ride, but one where the safety bar is broken and the animatronics are glitching out. The film also tries to wrap things up with an Infinity War style cliffhanger. Dom is trapped at a dam with his son. The plane carrying the team is shot down and everyone's fate is left in the balance. But does anyone actually believe Roman, Tej, Han, or Ramsey are dead? Of course not. Giselle, who fell out the back of a plane in Fast 6, pops out of a submarine in the final scene. Gal Gadot is back, The Rock is back in the post-credits too. Death is a joke in this universe now. Consequences are non-existent. Fast X just shows a franchise that is running on fumes, refusing to die, and is kept alive solely by the sheer charisma of its villain. It's a parody of itself, but as much as I hate the stupidity, I can't help but want to see how this train wreck finally ends. And that brings us to the end of the road. We've looked at 10 movies, 20 years, and billions of dollars of property damage. So the biggest question remains, why? Why do we still watch this? Let's bring this one home. I have watched this franchise mutate from a gritty, point-break ripoff about stealing DVD players into a superhero soap opera where cars go to space and people come back from the dead more often than comic book characters. I have seen physics get thrown out the window, beaten with a wrench, and set on fire. I have seen Vin Diesel transform from a street-level anti-hero into a sage-like soothsayer, delivering sermons of morality while wearing a tank top that defies the laws of tensile strength. And yet, I am still here. Why? Why do we keep coming back to a franchise that has objectively lost its mind? The easy answer is that it's dumb fun. It's popcorn cinema, but I think it goes a little deeper than that. The Fast and the Furious is a cultural anomaly. It is the only franchise in history that started as a niche subculture film and evolved into a global juggernaut by listening, perhaps too intently, to its audience. When we said we liked the heist in Fast 5, they gave us bigger heists. When we joked about them going to space, they went to space. When we mourned Paul Walker, they gave us the most respectful, tear-jerking send-off. They leaned into the absurdity because they knew that deep down we didn't want realism. We wanted to see a car jump through 3 skyscrapers. We wanted to see The Rock flex a cast off his arm. We wanted to see just how far they could push the envelope before the envelope burst into flames. The franchise works best when it hits that sweet spot between heart and spectacle. Fast 5 had it, Furious 7 had it, F9 did not have it, and while Fast X brought some fun back thanks to Momoa, it's clear the tank is running low. But having said that, I'll be there for Fast 11, and probably Fast 12 if Vin Diesel decides he needs another paycheck, because despite the flaws, it is a beautiful, chaotic, NOS-fueled disaster. So to bring this one home, The Fast and the Furious is the greatest bad franchise ever made. It is a testament to the power of charisma, practical stunts, and the refusal to ever hit the brakes. Anyway, that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the madness, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment. What is your favorite part of this franchise? And of course, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.